in an hour. So what I have here that I'd like to show you, Mr. Speaker, is this. What did the term white nationalism mean in the year 2000 when it was virtually unused, or in any year prior to that when it was also virtually unused? Then what did it mean in 2001, 2, 3, all the way up? You can see that it's virtually unused all the way up until it never even starts to move until 2015. This is a LexisNexis search of the term white nationalism or white nationalist derivatives of this term. And LexisNexis, Mr. Speaker, goes into blogs and web postings and newspaper print and magazine print, you name it. If it's in print out there, LexisNexis is very likely to have it all. So this is the only objective way that you can quantify the utilization of this term. White nationalism, virtually unused all the way up until 2016. And there it jumped, and I know the rest of the numbers by memory. I guess they're there. It jumped in 2016, it jumped up to 10,000 times a year, virtually unused, and all of a sudden in 2016, there it goes, 10,000 times a year. The 2017, 30,000 times. In 2018, it's still up there at 20,000 times. Now, how did it happen that a terminology that had been virtually unused all of a sudden became used in multiple times, up to 30,000 times a year, when 100 to 200 times a year is this virtually unused definition down here? And how did it happen that this is the word that gets tagged on me? Is that an accident, Mr. Speaker? I don't think so. And in fact, any objective person looking at the data couldn't come to that conclusion either. So this is the annual utilization, virtually unused up until 2016, then to 10,000 times a year, then up to 30,000 times the next year, and still at 20,000 the following year. This is a weaponized term created by the left to attack conservatives with. It's one of their weaponized terms. They have multiple weaponized terms now because they wore out the term racist, and they need to make up some new terms that they could be offended by. And so in this one, it shows, so how did this happen that 2016 was the year that the term white nationalist was used 10,000 times in that year? And so I asked them, break this thing down, LexisNexis, utilization of white nationalists, month by month throughout the year of 2016. That's the jump year down here. So here's the data. From November and December, it's down here used a little more than perhaps you would say. You could still call it virtually unused, but there's a little blip in August. And then it jumps up in November, and it's still up there in December. What happened in 2016 that brought about the use of the term white nationalist as almost always a pejorative term, almost always used to attack conservatives? What happened? Well, there was a circumstance that Donald Trump was elected President of the United States, November 8th, 2016. And when that happened, there was already a gathering for the hierarchy of the Democratic Party to gather together at the Mandarin Occidental Hotel here in Washington, D.C. And their agenda was to best plan how they were going to utilize what they expected would be a Hillary Clinton presidency. They admitted that they had to change their agenda when they got the surprise of Donald Trump winning the election as opposed to Hillary. And they did change their agenda, but at the Occidental Hotel, by the way, led by George Soros. His face is on the front cover here of Politico's article that tells about this. There's several other articles, Mr. Speaker, but George Soros led on this. And so there they planned how they were going to deal with a Trump presidency, how they were going to try to handcuff and tie down and refuse and resist. And Mr. Speaker, if we remember what happened that came into our verbiage also, and I didn't run the LexisNexis numbers on this, but I am certain I'm right. Resistance movement would be also probably a little more used than white nationalists, but we might be able to define that as virtually unused until the conference at the Mandarin Occidental Hotel here in Washington, D.C. that started on the Sunday, November 13th, the Sunday after Trump was elected president. And there they planned how they were going to deal with the Trump presidency, how they were going to handcuff him, tie him down, resist, resist, resist. The resistance movement was born in that hotel by Democrat leadership led by George Soros, and no doubt funded by George Soros. And the executive director position that was managing over all this was as a Soros, former Soros staff person. So they planned the resistance movement, and out of that also came some words to be weaponized: white nationalist, white supremacist, Nazi, fascist. That's what I was talking about in my interview with Trip Gabriel, as what had happened to weaponized language and how it was being used, assigned to people. We should never forget that we have the left in this country in particular, and I hope it's to a lesser degree, and I believe it is from the other side, assigns a belief system to people and then attacks them for the belief system that they have assigned. And they use the words that they've been assigned to use to assign to people for the belief system that they've assigned. And so what we have is virtually unused white nationalists here throughout all these years until we come to 2016. And then we have the events of November 13th, 14th, 15th, checking out on the morning of Wednesday, the 16th of November. That was taking place at the Mandarin Occidental Hotel. Clearly, somebody said, we're going to start using white nationalists against conservatives. Get to it. And they were at it while they were in the hotel, and it showed up with some 5,000 times in that little window of time there. That's now, if you wonder, well, maybe I'm not right on the date, Mr. Speaker. So I had them break down the month of November of 2016. And here's the month of November, the first, second, kind of virtually unused, under 100 times in any given day, until you get to, they checked in here the 13th of November, and zing, all the way we go up here to the top and back. This peak right here represents the times that they were in that hotel making the decision and activating the weaponization of a number of terms, but certainly the term white nationalism. And so they all knew what they were doing. They were in that hotel and they knew what they were doing. I'm just not convinced that the people in the leadership on the Republican side knew what was being perpetrated against our ideology, Mr. Speaker. And because it seemed as though a number of my own leadership decided that they were going to jump on the bandwagon too, with no chance for self-defense. And I would reflect that, you know, even if you go back through all of Christianity, if you go back through Judeo-Christianity, if you go back through Western civilization, if you go back through the foundation of American culture and civilization, you can go back to Jesus, you can go back to St. Paul. Everybody accused had a right to face their accusers and had also the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. I can find no exceptions in anybody's framework that's the standard. That's the civilizational standard. I've listened as our minority leader, Kevin McCarthy, has aggressively and effectively, I believe, and I'm glad he's doing it, defended our President of the United States and said that he deserves due process and he deserves a fair process and that he's innocent until proven guilty. I agree with all of that. But Kevin McCarthy doesn't seem to agree that that should be in a manner that